You are told, and many of you warned to stay out of this place, because there is a introduction into your lives of Eastern thought. And many of the contemporary religions and the mainline religions are not comfortable with Eastern thought. However, today we celebrate their biggest holiday, which is called Easter. Isn't that strange? And it's more than just a coincidence. What is the origin of this? Let me introduce you to a strange name that you've never heard before. Sounds, as I said before, like a waitress in a Mexican restaurant. Malita, or Milita. Milita was the original Virgin Mother. Okay. Virgin Moth, Virgin Mother. Okay. Many, many years ago, long before any of us could possibly think about this, out of Greek mythology and thousands of years before came the story of Melita, the Virgin Mother. In fact, in Cyprus, Greece, you can find a temple to the Virgin Mother, Melita. Melita gave birth, an immaculate conception, virgin birth, to a young boy named Tammuz. In Greek, his name is Adonis. In Hebrew, name is Adonai. Tammuz, born of a virgin, came down from the higher realms of glory to the earth to save the people, and wound up in the netherworld, the lower world, attempting to set people free. He was unable to get back up out of the lower netherworld, and his sister then came from the higher realms to save him and bring him back up to glory. Her name, Ishtar, which is pronounced Easter. Easter became the Holy Spirit, which filled Tammuz and raised him back up to glory. Basically, everything that you have experienced in your quote-unquote Christian life has its origin with Melita. Incidentally, something very interesting. Melita has a second name, and you see this many times around Christmas time. Her name was Myrrha. Myrrha. And they brought gifts of myrrh. Okay. Just an interesting thing. When Ishtar resurrected, or was able to bring Tammuz back up to glory, the date of his birth, restoring him back up to heavenly places in the ancient myth, was December 25th. Isn't that interesting? Tammuz, birth date December 25th, born of a virgin, name is Adonai. His sister Ishtar raised him back up to glory. There was a very wide following of this in Judaic circles in the Bible. Many, many people followed this and worshipped Tammuz and commemorated the resurrection of Tammuz, the virgin birth of Tammuz, and Easter. This then actually became the foundation of the Passover. The Passover is very mythological, very mystical. The Passover has absolutely nothing to do with something that actually happened. I know this is difficult to take, but it didn't. God did not slay the firstborn of anybody. There's nobody that keeps records better in the face of this earth than the Egyptians. There's not one Egyptian firstborn died. Never happened. But it happens. So, and the reason that Easter is so dangerous to you is that it distracts you and gives you a way to avoid keeping the Passover. And the Passover is this important. The Passover, and we'll cover it one of these Sunday nights when we have a little more time. I'll just give you a capsule as to why it's important. At the Passover, you are to remain in your house. That's yourself. Inside. Meditation. Okay. You are to consume the lamb. Very, very important. And there is to be no leaven in the house. Basically, the Passover is that staying within yourself, you raise your consciousness, and that which is the energies, the fire energies, consume that which is the pineal gland or the lamb or Aries. And when that has happened, all of this leaven which is used to raise your emotions and raise your ego and will putrefy actually your psyche is gone, and Passover occurs because then the angel, which is the impulse of death to your whole being, passes over you, and it will not occur. Most people have never, ever, ever kept the Passover. This is why the Passover has to be celebrated at the 14th day of Nisan. Nisan is April. It is the time of the spring equinox, the vernal equinox. It's very, very, very important that it be celebrated. Why wasn't it celebrated in October? Why wasn't it celebrated in January? Why wasn't? Because in Nisan is the time when the sun in the sky consumes the lamb. The sun enters into Aries, the lamb, and the consumption of Aries takes place. And when the consumption of Aries takes place, when the passion consumes the lamb, then summer comes. Spring comes, new life comes, all things become right. That's why the Passover cannot happen any other time but during the period of the equinox. Say. Now, as you come within yourself, you then daily, regardless of what time of the year it is, make Nisan appear, because it is the fire, the passion from the solar plexus, the place of the sun, in your lower flesh, which rises and consumes the lamb, which is the pineal gland in the brain correlating to Aries. When that occurs, summer happens in your life. New things begin. You look outside of your window and you see new buds on the trees. The grass is beginning to grow. The animals are in their little holes starting to give birth to their babies, the little squirrels and the little rabbits, and all things are beginning to become new. Why? Because the sun is consuming the lamb. The lamb is being consumed, the equinox is happening, and all things will become new. So you create the spring equinox every time you meditate because you raise yourself up and consume the lamb. Okay? Very, very important. That's what Passover is. And by following the Easter bonnet, the Easter parade, the Easter bunny, and the Easter eggs, you have missed this, and in most cases, your life has paid for it. Okay? You have not purged the crap, the leaven, out of your system. And it has festered in there, and it has caused your emotions to rise, it has caused your ego to rise, it has caused your anger to rise, it has caused depression to rise. All of the garbage that has happened in your life is because you have not made Passover in your being. You have not kept the Passover. And you have been disturbed and persuaded not to keep the Passover by your religious leaders who's called it Easter. And you had no idea where in the world this Easter came from. When you meditate and raise that power from the lower to the higher, the lamb is consumed inside of your house, the leaven is purged away, and the angel of death, which is death to your spirit, passes over you. Has nothing to do with a literal thing of staying in a literal house, nothing to do with eating a literal lamb, nothing to do with even a literal equinox. The equinox is just there to show you that when the sun consumes Aries, when the fire consumes the lamb, there will be new life. There cannot be new life in the universe unless the fire consumes the lamb. There cannot be new life in the universe unless the sun consumes Aries. Can't happen. So. And when this occurs, the firstborn of the Egyptians are killed. The firstborn males of the Egyptians are killed. Egyptians in ancient mythology and mysticism means that which holds you in bondage. The firstborn are the thoughts that come out of your mind. The firstborn male. Male is mind. So when you go through this, say, then those things which come out of your mind that get you in so much trouble are killed, destroyed. You're set free from them. The thoughts that have... I had a gentleman in here the other night practically in tears Friday night. Sat next to me after this was over. You don't understand. You don't even think of what religion and this system has done to people because they can't talk to you. And they'll come and start talking to me just by myself, just him and I, a few other people, him and I, and his tears coming to his eyes because he was convinced by his church that he was a worthless sinner. And he's lived his life like that. And I tell him, he said, you're telling what you're showing in the book, it's all different. Jesus never said, Jesus said, you're the light of the world. So, God said, this is what you got to do. But it's all in here. And nobody has the slightest idea. I saw them on television. Thousands of people assembled in a place in Rome, and they had priests sitting on the altar, and they had their shoes off, and somebody was washing their feet. Literally. What was accomplished? What in the world would somebody washing somebody's feet have to do with God? Because Jesus said, you can have no part of me unless I wash your feet. Your feet are the part of you that touch the earth. The earth, mystically, is your mind. The part of you that touches your lower mind must be washed by the Christ consciousness. And all of the thoughts, all of the fears, all of the guilt must be washed away. But instead of knowing that, they wash real feet. And it gets only funny up to a point, because you have to turn around and look at the world and the hate and the bombs and the scourges of drugs and the teenage suicide and all the horrors and put it right at their doorstep because they have refused the Passover, they have refused the Christ. So what is my job? My job is to shake the cage of the status quo. People get mad. They get mad. But that's what has to be. Passover is cosmic. And Christianity cannot deal with anything cosmic. They changed Passover to Easter. Do you know how Easter was celebrated? I can tell you exactly. There was a good thing in the beginning. But then Tammuz was raised from death to life every spring in a gray-colored egg. Okay? 40 days. They called it Count 40 at that time. For 40 days before, the women would cry and put sack ashes on their head, and that's the origin of Lent. And on the day that Tammuz was to rise out of the colored egg, they would all assemble and worship the sun. And that is the origin of the sunrise service. And all of this was directed towards the outside. All of this was directed to and they do it to this day. That's where it came from. There's only one time. Well, you know what it says in 1 Corinthians 5:7. Let me show you something. Page 158 in your little Bibles in the New Testament. 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 7. And I got the wrong one. Do I? Oh, you're right. I'm on 2 Corinthians. See these glasses? But you got to do something. You're responsible for this, nurse. Okay. Okay, 1 Corinthians 5:7. Purge out therefore the old leaven. Do you see it? What does it say? Purge out the old leaven, that you may be a new lump. And most of you qualify as a new lump. As you are unleavened, what? For even Christ our Passover is sacrificed. It didn't say Christ our Easter bunny. Right? And if they don't like East, and if things of the East are bad, why don't they call this Wester? Happy Wester. That would be good for the thing, you miserable wabbit. You remember that? Christ, our Passover, see, has been sacrificed. There was one mention that was put in by a translator of the Bible in the Middle Ages who put the word Easter in the book of Acts. It's the only time it's ever mentioned. There's no such thing. There is no such thing. It's all made up. And you know why it was made up? Let me tell you exactly why it was made up. And I will call priest, minister, it was made up because the church that originated this was anti-Semitic. It was anti-Jew. And it wanted nothing at all to do with anything that was Jewish. And Passover was very Jewish. And so they said no more Passover, because at that time the church used to go around with knives killing Jews. It was called the Spanish Inquisition, among other things. And so they changed it from Passover to Easter. And we sucked it up and loved it because they said it was holy. Celebrating Easter is an affront to Jesus Christ as bad as if you went to a masquerade party at the Kennedy Mansion in Hyannisport dressed as Lee Harvey Oswald. It is, because this thing of Easter, in Babylon, they would celebrate it on the day of the rise of Tammuz from the egg by grabbing the women of the town, and the women of the town would offer their bodies in sex in the temple. And they had these great sexual orgies, and they had rabbits, and they had chicks all over the place, and it was all fertility, it was all sex, it was all prostitution, and this is your holy day. As I said last week, you do get the opinion, if you study this, that somebody has really screwed this up. Easter is a form of worship that is the rite of spring. And of course, that in and of itself is not wrong. But you're missing the Passover. You're missing the inner sacrifice. You're missing the inner communion with the pineal gland, which is Aries. You're missing the new life. You're missing the recreation that takes place when you scientifically allow that energy to rise up to the pineal, light the right hemisphere of the brain, and make a new you, and make things come to life inside of you. And children are deprived of it. One of the most beautiful things that happens in this church now is on Tuesday nights in meditation, parents bring children here. And the kids fall asleep in the corner. They curl up on the floor, wherever. But they are under this beautiful movement of this Christ vibration in this place. It's just the most wonderful thing that could possibly happen. And we have deprived children of it because we say, oh, well, you'll open your mind to the devil. Can you imagine this? This is what these people say. They're washing people's feet, they're eating eggs and all this junk, and they're telling you, and they have presided over a Holocaust ever since you've been alive. Never has there been an end of people killing each other, raping each other, and fighting with each other and separating from each other. Never has there been an end of it. And this, oh, watch out for the new age. Watch out for the old age. Thank God that it's coming to an end.